It's interesting how a piece of Sonic media can bring me back to talk about the series. Rather than looking at it with slight disappointment, we know where I'm going to go with this. For a refresher, this channel used to be called Knuckles Channel 3 and Knuckles, where I, as a Sonic tuber, repped the Red Boy as I made silly Sonic Mania videos and some challenge videos. Knuckles is my favorite character, so naturally, I was excited to see him become part of the movie series with the second installment. Once word got around about a potential TV series that centered around the gullible echidna, I was curious. After viewing the trailer for the new show, this is kind of a weird show. Like, I can't say if it's good or not, it's just really bizarre. It does seem like the humor is gonna get a little old, a little stale and repetitive. That's pretty much what I think about it. Not sure what I watched. I'm pretty sure the humor is gonna get old, and I just want to see Knuckles punch things, especially with his gloves on fire, which I hope that's the maximum heat Knuckles attack. Yeah, it was not what I was expecting. Then we got closer to the show's premiere. Reviews and articles discussed how this wasn't really much of a Knuckles show and has more to do with Wade Whipple, Green Hills, Deputy Sheriff, and Village Idiot. I don't have anywhere else to mention this, but the marketing for this show did include a brand integration with the NXT North American Championship match at NXT's event Stand and Deliver. They brought a mascot. Professional wrestling is weird. Oh, and there's also this clip of Nikki Cross running over to meet Knuckles.
Can I give Knuckles a hug?
You can give Knuckles a hug.
Say no. Oh no, we've lost her. Have a hug.
It's oddly wholesome. Upon its release, the show was met with positive reviews from critics who were able to watch the show early, and heavily panned by an astounding number of content creators, including myself. I joined Garrula64 and Channel Pup on the Sunset City podcast just to blurt out my criticisms that were off the top of my head. Now with a script in hand, let's talk about why I think the Knuckles show is probably the worst Sonic show I have ever seen. Quick note, I'm not 100% sure how much of this video will be presented with actual video because it is a TV show, so I might have to use still images in place of actual footage. I'll use what I can. I'm also going to be spoiling the whole thing, so this is your warning. Let's begin. We begin with our rougher than the rest of them echidna going through this makeshift obstacle course as he aims to keep himself ready because training as a warrior is all he knows. His antics chase off another set of construction builders, and Sonic decides to give him a talk about making himself at home. It doesn't go well and Knuckles is grounded.
I have no idea what that means.
Anyway, on to our other main character, Wade Whipple. We start his journey at failure. To be specific, his failure to beat a little girl at bowling, which gets him kicked from their team by Jack Sinclair, the team's captain and bounty hunter. Gee, I wonder why he needed to tell us that. Basically, he was putting a team together to go to Reno, Nevada for a tournament. But enough of that, we're going back to Knuckles because he has a conversation with what appears to be Christopher Lloyd as Pachacamac. After a small talk with some wackiness, Knuckles now makes it a goal to take on a protege. Something that seemed really off was that Pachacamac was unusually cartoonish. The more I thought about it, I was convinced that this was Knuckles hallucinating or something, because there was no way he would see Pachacamac as more cartoony than what Sonic usually is. Also, how would Knuckles have knowledge of the bowling tournament in Reno? It's not like Montana is right next to Nevada or anything. Cut back to Wade preparing to train, only to nearly die at the bench press. Knuckles takes him on as an apprentice, and now something completely different. Turns out Gun was tracking Knuckles this entire time. Willoughby, one of the agents, shuts off the monitors and banishes a random gun agent to the Mushroom World with the help of Mason. They're working with an obviously insane person working on Eggman's robots. Somehow he has a lot of quills from Knuckles, which brings up another question. Are they just shedding quills randomly, or is this because of their fights? Back to our duo, Wade brings Knuckles to where his battleground is. It is at this point where we get some backstory from Wade, and pretty much his dad abandoned him and bowling was his coping mechanism. The former gun agents teleport to the bowling alley and a fight begins. Mason has a derivative but really cool line, only for the show's attempt at humor to rear its ugly head. Get used to the jokes being drawn out. This show is full of it. I'll say this about the fight scene. I get that they're trying to fight a CGI character, and it really looks like it when Willoughby is trying to use her rifle as a sword. Then there are parts where having a wide shot of both characters isn't needed, and it looks a little bit better. Oh, and I know there wasn't going to be much violence because it's based on Sonic, which I'm not going to lose any sleep over. To wrap up episode 1, Knuckles is about to finish off Mason, but Willoughby uses a ring to send the echidna into a trap and drives off. Oh, and Wade is just cowering there. Way to go. The episode ends with what the intro of the show will be. It's actually kind of charming. I love the drawn animation for this, and I can tell you now it's going to be misleading as hell. Before I get into that, episode 1 isn't bad. It's also not great, but it does an okay job with setting up the story and showing our main antagonists. Some things didn't make sense, which did take me out of it, but if they can cut the length of their attempt at funny bits, I think it'll be fine. Spoiler, it's not. Another spoiler, Sonic, Tails, and Maddie are nowhere else in this series. Let's move on. Episode 2. We begin with the rogue gun agents bringing Knuckles to the Sonic reference ski resort. Here is where we get an idea of who Wade is when he finds the resort. He's an idiot officer who watches too many cop movies. Think Nick Frost's character from Hot Fuzz, but less likable. Honestly, if you just want a good buddy cop movie, watch Hot Fuzz, though it does get a little graphic. It is at this point that I can say that very little happens in this episode. There's some back and forth between Knuckles and the former gun agents with very little really said. Then it switches to Wade, who daydreams about a totally epic rescue mission to that f***ing Holding Out for a Hero song. This is followed by more back and forth where Willoughby claims to know everything about Knuckles. Wade finally makes his appearance, only to completely screw everything up and totals the police car in the process. He tries to save it by attempting to use the gauntlet he picked up from the bowling alley and fails to understand how to use them. This leads into a fight against Mason, if you want to call it that. For someone who claims to be from an underground fight club or something, he does everything but directly punches Wade with the gauntlet. This fight is interrupted by an awkward segment where Mason's mother calls, and do you see where this starts to be agonizing for someone? Why is this here? Why is what would normally be a serious fight be interrupted by something so pointless? Anyway, Wade wins the fight and destroys Knuckles' confinement cube thing, which causes a huge explosion. They make their escape, have a heart-to-heart again, and seek refuge at his mom's house to finish the episode. This is the point where I no longer enjoyed the show. It was either really goofy with stupid Wade's stupid daydreaming, or really boring with all of the back-and-forth banter that adds very little. The quality of the writing has taken a huge hit here, but it's about to get worse. Let's move on to episode 3. Wade reunites with his mom and sister, and upon noticing Knuckles, his mom faints. By the way, get used to hearing Wade's sister talking about being in the FBI, because she has turned that into her personality. After a proper introduction to Knuckles and some questionable screening by Wanda, the family sits down for a Shabbat dinner. Oh, and Wade has flashbacks about it because sibling rivalry and such. And so begins a very long dinner scene where Knuckles speaks to Wendy about his past, gets a very questionable response, and Wade is stabbed with a fork. This goes on for nearly 9 minutes. Oh, thanks, sweet merciful God, we switch to a random guy looking at papers and making a phone call. Turns out, Wade has a bounty on his head for $100,000, probably for blowing up the car. We're now in Wade's room, and Knuckles takes a look around. My suspicions were right about him. Watches far too many movies, which explains the daydreaming from the previous episode. This is where we find out about Wade's deadbeat dad, Pistol Pete Whipple, and then it gets to the American Gladiators cutout.
Wade, these monks, they seem to be everywhere.
Oh, okay, enough time with Zap, thank you.
Okay.
Fucking really? Forget it. Knuckles and Wade's mom, Wendy, have a bit of a bonding moment in the living room, and then we get a home invasion from the bounty hunter of the other scene. After some property damage, a cringe 90s video game character line, and a fight scene, the Whipple family are brought together as the candles dim and the episode ends. God, this episode was unbearable. I think it would have been a snooze fest if Wanda Whipple wasn't the antithesis of what would make for a decent side character. She's just the worst. Then the dinner scene had to be longer than it had any right to be. The bizarre answer from Wendy raises an eyebrow, and was that cardboard cutout bit necessary? But if I had to give the episode props, the fight scene was rather impressive, and the bonding between Knuckles and Wendy was somewhat wholesome. We can only go up from here, but this show has one hell of a steep climb awaiting it. Let's move on. At the start of episode 4, Wade is dragged away and Knuckles chooses not to help, claiming that a warrior must learn to save himself. Which is an interesting thing to bring up. At no point has Knuckles trained Wade in this series. It's not even implied. At this point, Knuckles takes on Wade as a protege, he is kidnapped, and they had dinner. No real training took place, and they only escaped with the dumbest of sheer dumb luck. Back to the story, turns out it was Jack Sinclair who rode away with Wade in the hopes of collecting the bounty money. He's thrown into a cage that's being carried by a limo. Long story short, it was paid for by the parents of the little girl from episode 1. Apparently she has rich parents. Sinclair happens to have fallen on hard times, which explains capturing Wade and claims their totally existent friendship is like the Scorpion and the Frog story. Why am I going over this? Who the hell cares? He didn't exist until this show, and I doubt we're going to see him in the 3rd movie. Wade takes the advice of Knuckles and meditates for the great battlefield in the sky. He's interrupted by Sinclair shocking him and knocking him out cold. In this hallucination, meditation, whatever you want to call it, Wade is in the bowling alley from episode 1 with Pachacamac, I you not, performing a rock opera to motivate Wade by retelling the massacre of the Echidna tribe. By the way, this is where the majority of the Sonic references will be for this series, including Iblis. After not understanding the message Pachacamac was failing to get to him, Wade walks off and wakes up from his vision, or hallucination. He attempts to break out, only to be shocked by the bars and is knocked unconscious again. The next section of the rock opera is Knuckles' fight against Iblis to obtain the Flames of Disaster and be the strong warrior he needs to be for his tribe. From here, Wade wakes up and breaks out of the cage to then challenge Sinclair to a joust? He slashes the bounty hunter's ponytail and wins, allowing him to overthrow the leader and become the captain of the bowling team. Wade returns to his mother's house, and the four of them make their way to Reno, ending the episode. Well, that was a nothing burger of an episode. See, it would have been believable to a certain extent if Knuckles actually trained Wade, but he didn't, so Wade's breakout has zero logic behind it, since all we've seen him do is be a bumbling idiot. Also, was the rock opera a budget-friendly way to tell Knuckles' backstory? I just can't see it as anything other than that. Speaking of the rock opera scene, how the hell does Wade know exactly what Pachacamac looks like? I know, fictional world and aimed at kids, but some things just don't add up enough and break me out of my suspension of disbelief. It would have been great to trim a lot of the nothing in the last 3 episodes and call it a 4-part series, but sadly there's 2 more to go. Okay, before we get into the episode proper, I gotta address the music that plays at the start. Sounds really goofy because it's actually a clean version of the song Damn It Feels Good to Be a Gangsta by the Ghetto Boys. I made a comment about this on the Sunset City podcast. Yeah, my audio wasn't great. Thanks, Discord.
Okay, I'm not going to say that there was something resembling it in episode 5, in the very beginning of it. And as I was hearing, it's like, this is the stupidest thing I've ever heard.
Dude, one of the first fucking lines, like, from the song is like, I think it says, damn, it feels good to be a gangster. I had to pause the thing again. I was like, oh, they said damn.
Anyway, I mention it because this is where I'd like to add to my comments on that song. Only the clean version sounds really dumb because the original is incredibly vulgar, but also a much better song. Because of the rating of the series, you might as well look elsewhere for a fitting song. Anyway, we start with the group making their way to Reno and to the location of the bowling tournament. From here, they split up so Knuckles and Wade can go find Pistol Pete. While using AirPods, Knuckles attempts to help Wade communicate with his dad, and they eventually drop that. Pete appears to be happy to reunite with his son, and they decide to go catch up on some lost time. We cut away to the former gun agents who have been kidnapped and brought to the location of the dealer. He's dissatisfied with their failure, and honestly, this is the most serious the series gets. His backstory is that he's worked for Robotnik, prior to the whole losing his mind during the movies. The agents plead for one more chance as Willoughby explains how Gunn betrayed her and allowed for Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles to hide in Montana rather than exterminating them, because she considers them to be a threat. They're released from their handcuffs and are instructed to bring back Knuckles or die. Check for yourself. It says the price is their life. Now we go to the bowling tournament. The Bowling Tournament of Champions on ESPN 8 Dodgeball did this better. Throughout the episode, we're going to be hearing from these chuckle f***s. How nice. This is followed by a montage of the tournament, and the number of transitions and picture-in-pictures was really getting on my nerves. Someone please take away the editor from the computer this instant. Wade and Pete's team make it to the finals, which will take place the next day. We are then spared from more of that montage with a sit-down with the 2 team captains, and this is where we find out that Pete really didn't forget his kid. He just abandoned him. He even brought his CDs with him. CD's nuts. Wendy notices this and warns Wade, but he's so happy and dumb that he goes to meet his dad at his suite anyway. Turns out Pete was luring Wade because Mason and Willoughby are there, armed with new quill-powered weapon. It is at this point where the funniest possible interaction takes place.
And the first to go will be your precious sister. Oh, no.
I'm okay with that.
Wade!
I know it's not as funny as it seems, but when a show comes out of left field with that after lacking real comedy for 4 episodes, I couldn't stop myself from laughing my ass off. You got me, TV show. You actually got me with that one. They demand that Wade brings Knuckles to the same room, but the phone has to stay on to prevent him from warning the Echidna. He sends them, but Wade has to go back to retrieve his name tag, and obviously we know he's lying about this. And this is where the 5th episode ends. That's a little better. There are greater stakes for the former gun agents, but aside from that, it's still not good. The montage went on much longer than it should have, and all the little transitions really got on my nerves. I actually was getting annoyed over it. Aside from that, I got nothing. Anything I could mention has been addressed in previous episodes. And it's not like Pistol Pete is this amazing person who has seen the light and wants to reunite with Wade. He's still a dickhead who turned his back on him. And Wade is even dumber for falling for it. Let's finish with the final episode. Let's go. Our season finale begins with Knuckles making his way to Pistol Pete's room. When the door opens, Willoughby lets loose and fires at what would be a mascot. This is the one from a previous episode. I just didn't want to talk about it because I didn't care about that interaction. Knuckles gets the first strike as he knew about the ambush the whole time, because he had an AirPod on. So, when Knuckles was feeding lines to Wade, he had one AirPod on, and it was clear that Knuckles was talking into a phone. Not sure whose phone, but it didn't matter. It makes sense because Wade could have his own phone in his pocket, which connected to the AirPod. This, however, does not make sense. If Wade brought Knuckles into the call, the agents would know and would blow their cover immediately. Wade couldn't have Knuckles listening in the entire time because Willoughby would have most likely noticed the phone. No matter how you try to spin it, it doesn't make any damn sense. Alright? Cool, I'm moving on. The fight with the agents is a lot better than it was in the first episode since there's no potential to step into a gutter and destroy your ankle. It's actually decent. Wade sneaks in to untie his mom and sister, but Wanda wants to dislocate her thumb instead because blah blah blah, FBI is my personality. The more interesting fight is about to end, but Willoughby tries to send Knuckles away with more rings, only for that to completely backfire. Hey, if the two rings collide like that, did the agents die? They didn't teleport anywhere explicitly mentioned. Who cares? Let's look at Wanda's dislocated never mind. Now on ESPN 8 The Cringening, the finals of the bowling tournament begins. Eventually, after a bit of back and forth, they finally start playing. Much later in the episode, Knuckles notices people running and screaming and decides to investigate. He comes face to face with the dealer, in a weapon to surpass Metal Gear. I'm kidding, this tin can would probably be blown to smithereens by the Metal Gear. For the last of a tribe of warriors, with the power of the Flames of Disaster, Knuckles is a pretty shitty fighter. We're then forced against our will to the bowling tournament, and Pistol Pete gets all but one pin, but is able to finish on the second roll. Wade gets a strike and wins, blah blah blah, now he's face to face with the dealer. He puts up a fight, but is easily defeated after running out of bowling balls. Knuckles jumps back into the fight and uses the Flames of Disaster to crush the dealer. Pistol Pete tries to run off with a trophy, gets punched by Wendy, and the duo of Wade and Knuckles ride off to the sunset to end the show. Before I get started on how I feel overall, let me get some positives out there. The first episode was pretty decent. Knuckles and Wendy's dynamic was surprisingly wholesome. I mean, I wouldn't want more episodes of that, but it was nice to see for a brief period of time. Finally, the choice of music was pretty decent, although this leads into a criticism that I have about where the budget went. More on that later. I was also entertained by the fight scenes, with the Shabbat one being the most impressive one. With that said, the Knuckles show is bad. The story is bad, the pacing is atrocious, and the writing is insulting, and I want to throw half the characters in a trash can. Wade doesn't come off as a sympathetic goofball or anything, he continues to be the village idiot that doesn't learn anything from his half-assed adventure. He has little to no chemistry with Knuckles since they're both comedic reliefs in their own right. Knuckles due to his fish-out-of-water circumstances, and Wade because he's Wade. They don't have the dynamic that Sonic and Tom had in the first movie. There's no straight man for the comedic relief to bounce off of because, again, Knuckles is a naive outsider adjusting to his new surroundings. In fact, it's almost like every character is some form of wacky for the sake of it. The dealer was the only serious character, and when that's all you have, that's a really bad sign. The two agents were so unserious, I really couldn't care how menacing they were trying to be, it just fell flat to me. Some episodes just kept going, and going. Then there's the biggest complaint of the show. Something about a red guy who went missing and wasn't featured as prominently as the show's name would suggest. This isn't me saying it's a bad Sonic TV show, this is just a bad show. For all the reasons I mentioned, and the fact that they featured the comedic relief human side character as the star of the show. It's only called Knuckles because he's there sometimes, but also since two of the arcs involve him, training Wade for a lame-ass bowling tournament and the dealer wanting to use him for his power. I've seen post after post of people saying that the CGI to give Knuckles more screen time would be too expensive. If that was the case, why make it 6 episodes? Why use a long list of licensed music? In fact, cutting the fat and making the show, let's say, 4 episodes would probably allow for Knuckles to appear more often or to do something other than falling for easy tricks. It also turns out that there were multiple directors for different episodes, but even then, the writing had sealed the show's fate. This is piss-poor quality TV. What's even more baffling are the positive reviews from media outlets. Look, I normally ignore these since I'd like to form my own opinion, but I wonder if they saw the same TV show that I did. There is a bright side to this. I never have to watch the Knuckles show ever again. Hey everyone, thank you for watching today's video. It's pretty negative. Well, that's just how things ended up, I guess. And if you saw the show, I'd like to know what your thoughts are on it. Did you like it? Did you hate it? Are you indifferent towards it? Let me know in the comment section down below. At this time, I want to thank the supporters of this channel. They are the channel members and patrons who are supporting the channel. The $1 Chaos tier members have their names scrolling on screen right now. And I'd also like to thank the $5 Super Tier supporters who get a verbal shoutout. They are Martin YT Plays, Igo Dreamer, Sonic the Saiyan Hog, Retro Amok, Sonic 4109X, and Radiant Gems. But don't forget Jimmy Duke STR over on Patreon. Thank you all for your extra support. I greatly appreciate it. And if you want to support the channel as well and get perks such as exclusive channels on my Discord server or extra and early access content, you can use the join button below this video or go to patreon.com/GottaBeFrank. I started streaming on this channel again, so if you want more direct interaction, you can do so on the streams here and also on my Twitch page, twitch.tv/GottaBeFrank. Just remove the E because somebody took that one. But you can also go on my social media accounts, which are also in the description as well. And with that said, thank you all so much for watching. Hope you all have a wonderful and safe day. And until next time, take care. Have a good one.